Mr. Begley, members of the board, we do have several items for board discussion this evening. Our first item is EL tutor additions, and at this time, I will turn it over to Mrs. Aug.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Begley, members of the board, I have one item for discussion tonight regarding the need for additional EL tutors for the remainder of this school year. As you might remember, we're trying to bring some consistency to our hiring practices by coming to the board prior to the start of the school year, and then again, late November, early December with the additions that we will need for the second part of this school year. So the board has approved staffing guidelines for EL tutors. For K to 5, the ratio is 1 tutor for every 50 students, and in grades 6 through 12, it's 1 tutor for every 15 students. Tutor positions are not permanent positions, so these tutors will be hired only for the remainder of this school year. At this time, we have the following needs for second semester. A full-time tutor for Central Elementary and also Creekside Middle School, and half-time tutors for Compass Elementary and West Elementary. So we will attempt to hire people for these positions prior to winter break, but their start date would be January 12th, which is the start of second semester. So that concludes my item for board discussion. If you have any questions.
Well, this goes hand in hand with the presentation from
No.
last month, right?
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
All right, our next item for board discussion is in regard to some board policies. At this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Begley, and members of the board. Under items for board discussion number 2, board policies, I have 5 pieces of policy for discussion, letters A through E. In your board packet, I have included copies of the previous language and the proposed language as per OSB. A, starting with letter A, policy IGDJ, interscholastic athletics. This is a revision to previous policy. This is similar to about a month ago, we had several pieces of policy that dealt with similar matters about policies in regards to eligibility. Districts must use the most current OHSAA documents and requirements when communicating various requirements, particularly eligibility to students, parents, and coaches. And if you remember, this was the part where OHSSA essentially said, we're going to take over this. OSBA is going to get out of policy making when it comes to eligibility. Please let me know if you have any questions in regards to letter A. Under letter B, policy JHG-R1, Regulation 1, reporting child abuse. This is a revision to a previous policy. Proposed changes are to add consistency across our policies and procedures by adding school counselors to the process of reporting suspected child abuse. Previous to this policy change, we didn't have school counselors as part of this process. Please let me know if you have any questions under letter A, or letter B, I'm sorry. The next 3 policy changes are all related, beginning with letter C, KMA, relations with parent organizations. OSBA merged language in policy KMA, relations with parent organizations, with language in policy KMB, relations with booster organizations, to create policy KMA, relations with support organizations. This new policy requires support organizations to follow applicable board policies and regulations and receive approval prior to using school's name, district's name, logo, or mascot. Then under letter D, KMA-R, regulation relations to parent organizations. OSBA created this regulation, relations with support organizations. This new regulation outlines the rules that govern the relationship between the board, district staff, and other district support organizations. This regulation binds support organizations to the observation of good accounting and management practices, requires support organizations, when requested, to send certain financial and governance documents to the superintendent or the designee, and encourages collaboration between the support organizations and district staff on potential fundraising activities. And lastly, under letter E, when considering policy KMA, relations with support organizations, and the new regulations, KMA-R, relations with support organizations, OSBA recommends that board should take action to officially rescind KMB. So essentially what we have is the regulation replacing KMB, and then we have some tweaks with KMA. Please let me know if you have any questions over these last 3. And I should mention that Nancy and John and I have met to go over all of these last three, as there's some new language in there that we wanted to make sure we understood completely.
The goal, of course, is just to provide some more oversight.
Correct. Yeah, make sure essentially you don't have a booster organization or a PTC that's gone rogue, doing whatever they want, whenever they want type thing.
And while the organization's money still is the organization's money, the superintendent, the treasurer could request records
Correct.
where they're at.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, our next item for board discussion will be some capital projects. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Begley, members of the boards. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud.
No? How about now? So for tonight, for discussion under the topic of capital projects for 22-23, we'd like to highlight that even though we have multiple items for tonight, this does not include all of our capital projects, but just trying to highlight some of the larger ones. HVAC controls for the Fairfield Senior High School and East Elementary. Both these systems are at end of life and no longer can accept updates. The new HVAC controls will be non-proprietary systems. This will result in the district being able to have options when selecting vendors to maintain and work on the systems. This work will also include valve and Cat 6 cable replacements. Completing this work while replacing the controls maximizes efficiency and is at a lower cost than doing it at a later date. In addition, we are projecting a utility savings of up to 10% once these controls have been updated and finalized. I'd like to highlight that because as we all are reading, utility costs are projected to go up quite a bit. So the timing of this project I consider perfect timing. I'm going to go through multiple, let's say 4 of these projects, and then I'll ask if there are questions at the end of that, just because I don't want to wait after each one. The next one I'd like to address is a restroom and eye wash station for the transportation department. The transition away from our portables by the fuel pumps removed restrooms that were commonly used by our bus drivers, chauffeurs, and aides. I have been working with the OPSI Local 205, and we have agreed that a restroom and an eye wash station is needed for convenience and for driver safety. This structure will be very basic with a one-person restroom and an accessible eye wash station and shower for safety due to the fuel pumps nearby. In the meantime, we have provided a portable restroom for the drivers to be able to use, and actually today we had an LMC meeting and they actually highlighted, thank you so much for that, which, you know, how easy was that request? And I have a late winter, early spring completion goal for that. So we're trying to prioritize this because our drivers have been requesting it for quite some time. Crossroads Middle School locker replacement. Mr. Jamie Berkey has been working diligently with Mr. Kane at Crossroads to identify the location and number of lockers needed. This project was a planned 3-year project, and we were going to begin last year. We were unable to move forward last year, and with us being able to combine last year and this year's budget, we should be able to purchase and install all of the lockers needed. This is in part due to the original estimate included all the lockers that were in the building. But after working with Mr. Main, we were able to reduce the number while still able to provide enough lockers for building capacity and needed growth for the future. The tentative schedule to come back to the board for approval of a winning bid will be hopefully in early January or February, because the lead time of metals, etc., we're trying to get this done during the summer months. Roof restoration at South Elementary. This project is budgeted over 2 years. This is a restoration and not a replacement. A replacement is required when the roof material has completely failed and the insulation and decking has been damaged by water. This is not the case at South Elementary. A restoration is at a lower cost, approximately half, but still comes with an extended warranty. Overall, being able to do restorations versus replacement is managing our facilities for long-term success. So at this time, I'll take a break just for questions for those first four, if you don't mind. Thank you. Move on. Badge access systems. As we move forward with the process to bid the installation of the badge access system with the use of the State of Ohio Safety Grant, we have identified the scope of work and are finalizing the details of the door hardware changes and electrical needs. Because of the lead time for the equipment, our plan is to work with our maintenance team to complete the electrical work to maximize the use of our Ohio Safety Grant funds. Again, the goal is to come back to the board for approval of a winning bid, hopefully within a time frame of January and early February. And Ray, please don't tell Jim about that because he doesn't know yet. Security camera equipment. At the same time as the badge access bidding process, we plan to advertise for pricing for security camera equipment. Working with our technology department, we've identified the equipment needed and will use the remaining Ohio Safety Grant dollars to purchase. We have received to date $50,000 for 7 schools, and we must spend those dollars at each of the awarded schools. So from the projected budget of the badge access control at some of our smaller buildings, such as the elementaries and the middle schools, we believe we will have dollars left over that we will need to utilize. And to maximize that, working with Jeff McKinney, he said we would like to purchase camera equipment that his staff would be able to install at a later date. So on multiple levels, we're trying to maximize our grant money to take it as far as we can for the district and their needs. And then one final item, this one is somewhat more of a future project, but still wanted to put it out there for discussion. Safety field restrooms and additional parking. I've begun working with SHP on identifying a scope of work to add restrooms and additional parking to the Christie Dennis soccer field. The location would be on the visitor side due to the availability of utilities, which may not be ideal, but is necessary. Additional parking would be between the transportation building and the soccer field. To help with this project, the annual budget for the blacktop maintenance may be used to supplement if necessary. I have discussed this with Mr. Main, and this would not affect his current recess process with his students, which was important that we not interrupt his current process with his teachers and students. Again, this structure as well would be basic but functional, and we are also working to design a structure that will allow events to have access, but also to provide the flexibility for our transportation department to have access during the day as well, including the parking. I will provide future updates with this ongoing project as we continue to meet with SHP and finalize some plans, including engaging with our athletic department as needed to make sure we're fitting their needs. So with that said, again, sorry for the length. So with that said, is there any questions at this time for these items?
Could you maybe expand a little on that badge access program and what that will look like?
So the badge access system, currently we operate under 3 different systems throughout the district, and we have keypads. But not all doors that we have identified as a need have access. So as we roll out this entire project, already we've ordered the hardware, which took board action some time ago, and we did place that order because of the lead times, which thank you again for that. But we would then take all 3 systems and then roll them all under one. So we would have one system that would manage district-wide. The system that we have selected to go out for bid was Isonis, I always say it wrong, which again, working with Jeff McKinney and his team, that was the identified program that they like the best. And I've actually worked inside that program in a previous life and was pleased with their selection. So the idea is that when we go out to bid, the bid would be going out for the installation of the equipment that we've already purchased. Right now, we are working with a company called Allegion, which is actually the manufacturer of the door hardware and actually own Isonis, which was a recent acquisition within the last 2 years. We have since learned that they are actually spending a lot of money inside that program to expand it, which is great news because it's going to be a program with a sustainable company for a long period of time. They are also helping me identify not only the door hardware, but also the electrical needs, as I alluded to before. And from that, I will be able to pull that out from the bid because we have an extended period of time while we wait on the equipment to be able to, over time, install the electric to drive down the cost. They have reassured me that the electrical work should be and will be well within the ability of Mr. Jim and hopefully one other person that we've identified in the district to help grow. We have a custodian with electrical experience that would like to work in the maintenance department at some date. So this could be a good thing that we might be able to expand to see what his capabilities are. And then also Mr. Ray Freiberger, you're on the hook on this one too. Does that answer your question? You have additional questions?
It does, thank you.
Okay.
Anything else?
Again, I apologize for the length, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Perry.
All right, our last item for board discussion is a 5-year forecast. This time, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I hope everybody can hear me down there. Tonight, we are reviewing the 5-year forecast, which happens twice a year, November and May each year. And just to remind the board and the public, the reason the main objective of this forecast is to engage the board and the community in our long-range planning and discussions of our financial issues facing the district. It also helps to serve as a basis for determining the school district's ability to sign the certificate, commonly known as the 412 certificate. And also, it's a method for the Department of Education and Auditor of State to identify school districts that may have potential financial problems. Tonight, we're going to start talking about our projected revenue for this year. We're estimating the revenue to be a little over $102 million, with the two main sources coming from local sources, which is our real estate taxes, and our state sources being our state aid or foundation payments. So we're going to concentrate on those two items. Total valuation for our district is over $1.7 billion. Of that, 70% of it is made up of our residential and agricultural properties, while our commercial industrial properties make up about 26%. Public utility tangible personal property is about 4% of that total. And you'll see in our projections that we are thinking that collections will remain steady. For our district, collections usually come in at about 98 or 99% of the total, which is great. We've maintained that even through the pandemic, and we see hopefully that that's going to happen, maintain that for the future. So our real estate projections for this year plus the next 4 years, as you can see on the board, I do want to just mention that even though sometimes our valuations increase, that doesn't necessarily mean that the district receives additional revenue. So the last operating levy that we passed was back in 2011, and at that time we stated that we think it may last 3 years. Well, we're 11 years down the road, and we still are making that money work, but unfortunately, as you'll see a little later, that it's time where we may need to get some additional revenue to help extend the life of our district and our programs here. So our real estate again remains steady. State aid or unrestricted aid is the money we receive from the state. for the Fair School Funding Plan, which was in place last year and is again still in place this year. What we don't know is what's going to happen with the next biennial budget, which they'll start talking about now, coming up soon. And we won't know if they're going to take that phase-in, that's supposed to be phased-in over 6 years, if they will continue that phase-in for districts. According to some recent reports, the state has supposedly plenty of money, so there's really no reason for them not to continue to fund our education, but never know. This funding formula is based on actual students and seats. So over the years, we've talked about community schools, scholarship-type students. Those are not counted in our enrollment any longer. So we're not receiving the revenue for them, but then we're also not getting deductions or expenditures of those kids when they take the money away from us. So you'll see in our purchase services category later on in expenditures that there's a dip, but that's the reason. We're no longer receiving those deductions anymore. So our projected increase for this year is just under $1 million in our state aid. These are the projections as we know right now. Possibly in May, I may have more information depending on if they've passed the budget or released simulations for us to try and project what those might be in the future. So our total projected annual revenue, for this year and the next 4 years, is pretty steady as far as we can project. So with our expenditures, we are projecting over $113 million in expenditures for this year. And as I've said in the past, we are a service providing organization, so the majority of our expenditures are in salaries and benefits. So those amount to about 77% of our expenditures. And then the next category of purchase services, with that 11.7% in the green, mainly is fuel, utilities, which of course are going to be increasing slightly we're projecting they're going to increase over the next several years. So on the personnel side, you'll see several times where there'll be some shifting of monies. We are having the Student Wellness and Success Grant was money that was set aside in a different fund that now the state's saying that's now included in our general fund. So all the things that we were paying for are now shifting from that Student Wellness and Success Fund into the general fund. The raises that we have in place projected are at 2% for the remaining years of the forecast. We will be in negotiations with all of our unions coming up in the spring, so we have that to look forward to. And additional staffing positions for this year are listed there. Remember, we did expand our preschool program, so the majority of those are for preschool. We also reduced a position by using a half-time German teacher and a half-time Mandarin teacher. Again, the bottom showing that we are shifting the cost from the elementary guidance counselors back from the Student Wellness and Success Fund to general fund. For 23-24, you'll see that we have several positions in our special ed department that are currently being paid from our American Rescue Plan funds. Those will be shifted back to general fund because those are needed positions. We have a reduction of an athletic trainer with our new sports medicine agreement with Mercy Health. They are providing extra trainers for us. And then we will reduce the remaining half-time German teacher and Mandarin teacher for 23-24. But we are adding a half-time American Sign Language teacher. For fiscal year 24-25, 4 technology integration coaches that were being paid out of our ESSER funds are shifting back to general fund for that year. And then we have no additional positions included for the 26 and 27 fiscal years. So our personnel projections, you'll see on the screen, increasing every year, trending up, which is typical with raises included and a couple of those additional positions and the shifting of those funds back to general fund. Employee benefits usually goes hand in hand with the increases of salaries. Unfortunately, this year we received an increase in medical insurance effective January 1st of 17.9%, which is highly unusual for our plan. We've had some really good experience in the past, but unfortunately, our consortium of districts had COVID claims that happened at a higher incident than we've had and that had other insurance companies or districts had in other parts of the state. We also have, we had an expensive couple of babies born this past year, so all that influences the claims, which influences the premium increases. Hoping that we're having the last month or two better results, better claim results. So we are projecting 15% increases in the rest of the years of the forecast. We also have some money included this year for some benefits that are not covered by the IDEA grant because we're just not funded fully with that grant. And then again, shifting others positions back to general fund, we've applied the benefits also in this category. Again, same type of graph that you saw with the personnel piece. Purchase services, I'm going to just mention a couple things with this. We also have been using our student wellness funds to fund our school resource officers and our success program. Again, those are shifting back to general fund. We also added a safety coordinator position in transportation this year, and then some other installments, preventative maintenance type things. Mr. Perry and I have met and gone over where we think those will come into play in each of those years. The badge system is listed there. We also have a last payment for a bus lease this year, which is good news, except now we have 10-year-old buses from that bus lease. It's taken that long. At the moment, we do not have another lease in place for additional purchases, but that may be something we will need to discuss at a later time. A lot of preventative maintenance is included in purchase services. And those are those projections there. Capital outlay, many of the things Mr. Perry just talked about, we've included. I did want to point out, I know he didn't mention any dollar figures for HVAC controls, but that is a big ticket item, close to $1 million for capital outlay for those controls. And then, again, we're continuing to use purchasing power with buses through our EPC consortium. That our plan is to continue to purchase 2 buses a year. We also have our paving plan, Mr. Perry mentioned, is $225,000 a year that we continue to spend each year. And a lot of high-ticket items being planned. So those are our capital outlay projections based on our discussions with trying to plan out the future of where things will fall. This is our total annual expenditure projections for the life of the forecast. And then to give you a perspective on our total revenue being in the blue, total expenses in the orange, and our cash balance being that green line. As you can see, we are basically out of money at the end of 2025, June 30th, 2025. And this also, the financial summary also reflects this. So as you can see, there's a $10 million cash balance at the end of 2025. That, just in relation, that's only 1 month's worth of expenditures for us. So by July 31st of 2025, we are out of money. So we are going to need to have some discussions about some possible raising of revenue, additional sources for that, possibly some cost-cutting measures that we need to put in place. That is a plan that Superintendent Smith and I have to present to the board in February after discussions with our team. So we will be working on that. We already are working on that. But that's, that's where things, it's tough right now because there's a lot of variables, and sometimes it takes a long time to get the information you need to try and project where we're going to be in a couple of years. So again, that's up, we will have that discussion here soon. I'll be glad to answer any questions, comments.
Questions, comments? Yeah, Mrs. Lane, I appreciate this. I think we've done this, right, twice a year, every year, and we've talked about in the future, right? And we're creeping closer and closer to that future, where, as you said, we're out of money, right? We're already operating in a deficit. And I think there are going to have to be some tough decisions made. Any thoughts?
Yes. I did have a question. I know you said that we were basically going to be out of the wellness funds. If you can remind us again, that wellness money was $600,000 or $700,000?
No, it's over $1 million.
It's over $1 million.
Now, they are shifting the revenue back to the general fund
Okay.
to fund those expenses.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's included in those numbers.
Okay. I got you. But as far as the money that was granted to us by the state, we're having to shift them back to the general fund because it's expired. I wasn't aware that we had an expiration date on those wellness funds.
It wasn't an expiration date. It was just actually a different way of them giving us the money.
Parceling out the money.
They've now wrapped it into the Fair
Into
School
the
Funding
Fair.
Plan
That's
versus
right.
us having to do it in a separate fund.
Yeah.
And that fund was not included in the forecast, and now
Right,
it
because-
needs to be.
Yeah, because that money was out there before the fair funding plan was
Yes,
ever
yes.
put in place. As I look at the,
Excuse me,
the
Ms. Shorter, could you speak up a little bit?
oh, okay.
We're having trouble hearing you with the air conditioner.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
All righty, no problem. Okay, did you guys hear any of that? It was about the fair funding. It was just and a question about the wellness funds and how those were allocated. The percentage from the state in our match was 34.9%. What's the change between fair funding versus in the past? Because wasn't it about the same percentage?
It is a little bit more now, and it depends on what they look at to find what they consider our local wealth, our rural. I mean, we're actually on a funding formula where we've been on a guarantee in the past, but there's different factors that go into that, and one of them is like our wealth, they call it, of our
Yeah.
district. There's different components that make that up, but we are a little bit better than we were before. As I said, we are getting some increases just because of the way they're funding different items.
Okay.
So we're getting additional funding for like EL students, different categories, I guess is the best way to explain it.
Okay. And so for those EL students, what percentage are we getting from federal funding, since that is a Title, is it Title I? Is that
Title
covered?
I, we get a lot of funding through
Okay.
great federal grants.
All
I
right.
can get you that figure, the exact figure. I'll be glad to provide that to the board.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Another question that I had was in regards to the monies that we're spending out, or the monies that we're having to send to our parochial partners through Ed Choice and those types of things. Do we have any idea on that?
It's not part of our information anymore. I'm sure we could, because we don't see it. They're not funding it. They're not giving us the revenue and then taking it away later. But I'm sure we can dig and find that information. If you would like me to do that, I can do that.
Well, I
We have
think
an
only
auxiliary
because,
service program, what we call, where some of those Sacred Heart, Cincinnati Christian, Fairfield Educational Building receive auxiliary monies that we are the fiscal agent for them.
okay, yes, I definitely would like to, because that was one of the things that was discussed at the OSBA conference. There's a lot of conversation that's still being held about what to do, in light of the voucher program and its expansion. So I was just curious. I'd like to understand what that impact is overall for us, and understand that it's a little harder to get that information. But if we could have some idea. Okay, I think that's it for the questions that I had.
Other thoughts?
Just a comment of, if we've extended that levy from 11 till now, that's fantastic. Thank you for managing it that way. But we know there's an end in sight that we've got to address. And great questions, Ms. Shorter, thank you. And I apologize for interrupting you. So thanks for the information. And we'll have a big decision to make come February, so I'm excited to see and hear what you have planned, you and Mr. Smith, what you're talking about and how that comes about. And definitely have a deep conversation coming up, so.
Yeah, Mr. Clark, that's an excellent point. To get another 11 years, or to get 11 years out of that levy is tremendous work, and speaks to being good stewards of the community's dollars, for sure. You hit on it in terms of our expenditures being roughly 80% toward salaries and benefits, but I don't think we shy away from that. We've learned that teaching is labor extensive, and that's okay, right? Without that labor, we're in a remote environment, and that didn't work so well. So it's expensive, it's a challenge, but it's necessary. And inflation, medical expenses that you talked about, those are real numbers that escalate our expenses rapidly. And we're going to have to address it in a couple different ways, it sounds like. So
Yes.
I too look forward to a tough task at hand. Anyone else?
I couldn't have said it any better than the members before me. We've done really great over the last 11 years, and it really shows too, like Brian was saying, like how conscious we are of the community's money. So thank you so much for everything you do, and I also do look forward to seeing what's to come.